Welcome to Business Models for Creators with Jasmine Love. This is part one of a two-part episode. Be sure to come back next month for part two. Enjoy the show.
Hey, Creator Kings and Queens. Welcome to Business Models for Creators, the show where we explore the reality of people living a creator dream and help you turn your dream into reality. Today, our guest is Michelle Simmons, brand strategist and copywriter for entrepreneurs, small businesses, and visionary change makers. She's also an avid reader, a words nerd, and a weirdo of the highest order who can plug her nose with no hands. Let's welcome Michelle to Business Models for Creators. And even though she can't hear you, let's make some noise for Michelle. Woo! Michelle in the house. I said Michelle in the house. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, it's so good to see your face finally.
Yes, thank you for being here. We've corresponded via email. We've done 90 style group chats with my watch party, other episodes of the podcast, but I've seen your face on your website, but I finally get to see you live as a human.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, so let's dive into our first segment. I call it content sponging. As creatives, we have to consume a ton of content to stay inspired. Sometimes that content is within our own field. Oftentimes, it's outside of our field. But I'm curious, what have you been sponging on lately? Reading, watching, listening to?
I have been, right now I am reading. I read a lot, as you've already touched on here. And it is really important as creative. I agree. It is really important to just have all of this content. For me as a writer, it's really important for me to always be reading. So usually I'm reading a few things at once. Right now I'm reading Jess Kidd himself. The title of the book is Himself. I read a book of hers just recently. It was amazing. It was called The Night Ship. And it was about I don't know if you are familiar with the historical ship, the Batavia, or it went down. It was a galleon ship that went down near the Batavia. So we call it the Batavia incident, basically. And it was it was back in the 1600s, like pirate days.
Yeah.
And so this book is about a girl on the ship in that time. And then in another time period in the late 1980s, a boy who lives on that part and on that part of Australia where the shipwreck happened. It was like a shipwreck and the people were marooned on this part of Australia and on this island. And so it's just a really beautiful, I'm going on about the details, but essentially she's just a really beautiful writer. Her writing is dark and lyrical and sort of storybooky, and it was gorgeous. When I read The Night Ship, I was like, I have to read everything that she's written. So right now I'm reading Himself. It's wonderful. I'm reading Tyler Merritt. I Take My Coffee Black. And I have sitting next to me, I haven't started it yet, Atomic Habits, which is like the book that everyone reads. And I haven't read it yet. I know sort of the principles, but I haven't sat down to read it. So that is coming up next. But I'm always reading, I usually have a few things going on at once. And then I listen to a lot of true crime, like many of us. And so I've been really into the Prosecutors podcast recently. It's cool because it's still a true crime podcast, but it's two prosecutors who are the hosts. And so you sort of get a different perspective on the cases. You get a lot of, especially the ones that have really famous legal battles, like the Michael Peterson staircase case or John Benet Ramsey or, some of those like really big ones. They're able to really break down what happened in the courtroom.
And is it literally called The Prosecutors?
Yes.
Yeah. So
The Prosecutors.
Fun fact, I went to school to be a prosecutor. And did all my internships in prosecution. But then I found out the justice system was extremely broken and I bounced. But it was so fascinating. I love my criminal law classes. I interned at the county level and at the federal level and worked on some really interesting cases that I'll remember for the rest of my life for sure.
That's amazing. They have a sister podcast called Legal Briefs that they started to do a little bit more of the nitty gritty. So they go over things like 404B and Brady and all of those kind of legal technicalities that people have lots of questions about. And also more real time stuff. So like real time things that are going on that we're seeing, they kind of will break down sort of the legal aspect of it in this sister podcast. It's really great. I recommend it, especially with your background. I'm with you on that. I think in another life, I would have been a defense attorney. And I actually just recently read, it's called American Injustice by David Rudolph. He was actually the attorney for Michael Peterson. That was a really good one, about a lot about the broken system. I mean, that's really what it's about. Broken system, corruption, all that kind of stuff. It's depressing, but it's a really good read. I do recommend it.
Nice. And I love how you consume across genres, like the one that's kind of like historical fiction, and then you have a personal development book coming up, and then true crime. And that's the American Injustice one sounds kind of sociological. So yeah, you read very wide.
Yes, I have. Well, it just depends on my mood. As the mood strikes me, I'm definitely always consuming fiction of some kind because I feel like that really fuels my creativity. This is why I'm really loving this author right now, because her writing specifically is so good. It's not that I don't ever read, mindless fiction, but when I really feel like it's just always really good to have those writers who just write really beautifully that you can go to when you're feeling that kind of dryness or you want some inspiration, or just the kind of writing where when you read it, something sparkles and you just have to stop and read it again like 10 times. Any writer who can do that for me, I will read everything that they produce.
Yeah, and what was her name again? Jess?
Just Kid, Kidd.
Just Kid. I may have to look her up. I'm not a big fiction reader, but I love beautiful prose. I'm a poet, and so I may have to check her out just for the prose.
Yes, I think this is only my second book of hers that I'm reading right now, but I love it. And I think it was actually her debut himself, which is a great story about. You talk more about that offline.
Yeah, nice. All right, so let's dive into our next segment, a day in the life of a creator, where we explore the day-to-day of what it's really like to be a creator. So before we jump into your day-to-day habits, let's talk about how you got to where you are. So how did you learn to write copy and do brand strategy?
It's a it's a good question. I feel like nobody has a really smooth path to copywriting. It seems like the common thread is that we all sort of stumble our way into it. I learned first by kind of doing. I sort of got thrown into. I had a friend who she knew someone who had sort of a content agency, and she was like, "Oh, I'm writing all these articles. We need more people. Do you want to get in on it?" And I was like, "Sure." It really ended up being sort of content millie. And so I didn't know any better at the time. And so I would write the articles and I'd get paid, like a few cents per word or whatever. And I had a job on top of that. And so it was something I was trying to do in my spare time, which didn't exist. I had a toddler at the time. And it was just not working I tried twice and I left it twice because it was just burning me out. But when I started seeing ads for copywriting courses and seeing things that were like, oh, this is actually a career. So I had gotten this kind of good experience getting my foot in the door with content and understanding things like SEO principles. And, I'd work with the editor. So I was really seeing the direction that they were taking the content I was writing. And it was, and so anyway, I took that and then I joined a course. At the time it was the comprehensive copywriting course. It's offered through, her brand is Filthy Rich Writer.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
And it was a very much like an intro to copywriting course. And even though I'm not still really in that community or anything like that, I would recommend it for someone who just really and truly doesn't know anything. It was kind of a crash course. And what is copywriting? How does it work? How does digital marketing work? All that kind of stuff. From there, I went on to hone various skills with different trainings. I'm in the Copywriter Club, I'm in the underground, I have copy school, those kinds of things to learn more at one time. But
copy school, is that Joanna Weeb or is that somebody else?
Yes.
Okay, Joanna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through Copy Hackers. And so, it's kind of like I started out when I decided to really, okay, let me do this. Let me do copywriting. This was a couple of years after I had kind of quit the content thing. I sort of had my foot in the door again in the real estate industry. My mom's a real estate agent and I know a lot of real estate agents. And so she was like, hey, can you write a bio for me really quick? I need something for work. And I was like, sure. So I wrote her this bio and then everyone in her office was like, oh my God, can she make one for me too? And, so I was like, hold on a minute. Let me think about how do I do this? Like, how can I do this and make it make sense? So I started out by doing things like that. And then it was like, oh, can you make me your Can you write me a resume? Can you, help me fix up my about page? So it was sort of like, it was a natural progression. No one really taught me how to do brand strategy. It's just something that's developed over time. What I realized is if someone can hand me 10 pages and call it their resume and have it list everything that they've ever done since they were in high school, like waiting tables, and then I can turn it into a one pager that really paints a picture of who they are as an employee. That was always my goal. It's like, tell me what you accomplished at those jobs. Tell me about who you are as a person so that I can get to know what you would be like as a professional, and we can get people interested in that part. And then when you get in for the interview, you can talk about more details. But right now we really just want we want your future employer to be able to understand what you bring to the table as a professional and as an employee, right? Do you have natural leadership skills? Are you better as part of a team? Things like that. If I can do that for someone's resume, and I did, and they would get jobs and it was great, then I could probably do that for more people, for brands. Like, it just kind of made sense. So that's sort of how I got my start. Branding is kind of strange because this is always true. There's no one right way to do anything. But when you look up, like, what is a mission statement? What's a vision statement? How do you do a brand compass? You'll find so many different ways to do it and so many different frameworks and approaches. So I really and truly just did a lot of Googling and studying and trying to put together what I thought it all meant and what it should look like. And then when you do the work and you see what's working and what's helpful, you can kind of just hone it from there, if that makes any sense. So I didn't get to go to a branding class. I just had to sort of figure it out.
Yeah, and let me ask you about that self-taught. That's the way to do it, because experiences was most important. But how did you get the guts to go from Googling to a client is depending on you to do this? How did you overcome the imposter syndrome and just go for it? A lot of people really struggle with that.
There is no overcoming imposter syndrome, I'm pretty sure. I don't think any of us ever do. But, it's kind of like, I think it was Rob Marsh who told me one time in a training, if you can write better than the people you're helping, you're helping. If you are a person who can sort of look at a pile of stuff and make it make sense, then you can be helpful to somebody. And again, I started out with a lot of just figuring out people, like the realtors that I would write bios for and things like that. It would just sort of snowball from there. Sometimes it'd be the same person and then they'd refer me to someone else. And then maybe they don't need just, like a bio, maybe they need a whole website. And then I have to figure out how to make that make sense. So it wasn't really, it just was sort of a natural progression. I felt like it took me a while before I hung out my shingle as like a brand strategist and realized this is really what I'm doing. It was really just sort of the client work that led me to that conclusion. I was kind of like, okay, I see how you're operating and I'm seeing that, you're an agent who really builds community. That's what's important to you. And I can see it through XYZ things that you do. So I think that we need to make sure that people understand this about you. We need to talk about it when you're thinking about the content or when you're thinking about how you're going to word things on your website. We need to make sure that we're making people understand that this is who you are as a person. So that's really kind of just where it came from. It wasn't really ever me going like, I'm a brand specialist. It was a really long time before I realized that was kind of the hole that I was filling and my special sauce, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that Rob and Kira call it the X Factor over at the Copywriters Club, but I like special sauce. Yeah. It sounds tasty.
Yeah, I went through the accelerator with them and I didn't really choose that for my X Factor at the time. I was like, I don't think I want to do branding. I want to figure out some other way to niche myself. And I ended up just coming back to it anyway, because it's just the way that I operate. I can't help it. It's just the way that
Yeah, and that's actually really important. I want to highlight this because I am this person. I've had multiple business ventures, not only copywriting, but I struggle with the niching and I can't figure it out. But I heard something and I need to listen to it more, but everybody needs to hear it. I'm going to mangle this, but it's easier to steer a ship or redirect a ship that's in the water moving than one on the dock. So to find your niche, you have to start doing things like exercises are great and thinking about it is great, but you'll really find it when you just roll up your sleeves and get dirty and start doing the work, and your niche will find you. Because that's what your whole story is. Your niche found you as you started doing the work. So I think that's really important for people to try. instead of staying in your head with niche exercises. Just start doing stuff and see what you like, see what you're good at, see what makes an impact.
It's 100% true. And that was another thing. As I remember going through an edit with a client, and it was like a welcome email. And there was this phrase that he wanted me to include that I was like, I think we're saying that it's a little bit of a show don't tell. So look at all the ways here in the copy that we're indicating this, and we're painting more of a picture than we are saying it with our words, like, you know, and that was another real light bulb moment for me, where I was like, okay, and it was just sort of in the midst of the project, in the midst of the work. I was like, okay, this is really what I'm doing. And, you know, and it happens the other way. You start working and if you're interested in one type of copy, you know, there are so many ways that we can niche as copywriters. If you're interested in something else, explore it, because you just don't know. I have a friend who started out doing more of what I do. She was sort of a brand messaging and web copy person, and she's moved into the sales and launch copy space. And I just recently asked her, how did that happen? Like, how did you make this switch? And she said, I was interested in it. I didn't think I could do it because I had spent time niching myself this other way. But then I had the opportunity to sort of get my foot in the door with one of these projects, and I loved it. And it is just easier for me and lights me up in a different way than the other work did. Like, it just clicked for me. And I think that is how it is. And you just have to do the work, and like you said, I think it'll find you.
Exactly. And I want to rewind and go backwards a little bit. When you first started at the kind of content mill place, you had another job. What was your day job or your, main job at the time?
I was doing I was working for an attorney. It was like a legal sort of admin job. It was like contract compliance for real estate. And so it was at home. It was nice because I had some modicum of flexibility. It was at home. My kid was home with me. But it was full time, and it was not flexible hours. It was like 8 to 5. Mm-hmm. And it became difficult for me to manage because of my own, like my personal life and other all kinds of things that I had going on. My son had various therapies at that age, and it was kind of hard to manage. So I didn't think I'd be able to leave it for a while. Not that I didn't like it, but when I got to considering copywriting as a real career move, I was not sure of how or when to take the leap. Mm-hmm. But eventually I just did. I just did.
Nice.
And so that's what I did before.
And I was curious because I did a little light LinkedIn stalking as we're getting to know each other. And I see your background is in psychology. So I was curious if you made a leap from psychology to marketing, but you actually were in legal. So that's why I didn't even know that.
I had so many jobs that were just random. That was just whatever was working for me at the time, which was not the plan, but it was all fine, and it was all really great experience. And yes, so I went to school for psychology, but I didn't want to be a therapist. I think I did when I first set out. I had been interested in psychology for as long as I can remember. I think I was like 12 or 13, and I had a stepbrother who brought home some old psychology textbook, and I was like, I'm hooked. I'm obsessed with this. This is amazing. But when I went to college, I was more interested in the cognitive aspects and behavioral psychology. So my undergrad research was around social psychology, and that's what I really wanted to pursue. But I didn't know how to figure that into my life if it wasn't going to, and I didn't really want to be in high academia. I didn't want to work there. So I just didn't really know what to do with it. And it's funny because when I tell you, I started seeing the ads for copywriting courses, and it was like, were you a theater kid? Were you a psych major or interested in that? Were you in creative writing? Have you always been a natural writer? It was like all of these things, all of these like traits and personality things. And I was like, oh my God, it's me. She's like, really?
Oh my God.
And I was like, I know copywriting is working because it's working on me right now. I'm about to buy her course because she's speaking to specifically me. So
see, that's great targeting. I've actually never seen a copy ad like that, because that would apply to me too. I was a theater geek. I had an aunt that had psychology textbooks when I was a kid, and I went through the textbooks and was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I was a creative writer and got awards in creative writing in school when I was young. But I never saw that ad. How did I even get into copywriting? But the ads I saw was like, there were lies, actually. The ads I saw were about like working on your laptop on the beach But now that I have experience, that makes no sense. You'll get sand in your keys. You can't concentrate. And like, the bro, make money online, the writer's
Yes.
life, and blah, blah, blah. So those are the ads I saw. And the first copywriting course I took was called like the Accelerated 6-Figure Copywriter or something. But they were just dangling money bags out there, and I'm a sucker. And that's why I'm a good copywriter, because I'm a sucker for copywriting. But if I had seen the ad you saw, I would have jumped on it sooner, because that is so me for sure.
I was immediately certain that this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. There was no, I mean, I don't know about the rest of my life, but for as long as I can do it, like I was like, that is for me. That's definitely for me. I think that you just sometimes have those moments where you can really see a clear path forward. And it's like all of the things that I was interested in and all of my skill sets and all the sort of things that I'd been picking up over the course of my life and education are a perfect fit for what I do now, including the niche that I've chosen for myself. I get to work really closely with people. When you're doing branding process, sometimes it's really vulnerable and people get really in their feelings when we're on like just a kickoff call. It's fun, but sometimes you're just really kind of poking to try to get like deeper answers from them about like why they started, why they do what they do, those kinds of things. And so all of that stuff I feel like is perfect for my background, and all of those things just sort of led me to where I am.
Nice. So let's dive into that day to day as a copywriter and brand strategist. So let's start first thing. What time do you wake up in the morning approximately? And do you have a morning routine?
Yes. So right now, as we're recording this, it's summertime. So things are slightly more relaxed because my husband is an educator, so he's home for the summer. So it's nice because he and my son can go do the fun things while I'm working. And the mornings are a little bit slower, but typically for most of the time I wake up at 5:30 because I have to start getting my kid ready. We start doing the school stuff and the run and everything at like 6:30. And so I need some time. I'm not a morning person at all. I hate mornings, and I really need to ease into my day. So I get up early so that I can sit in the dark in my dining room with my coffee and my book light, and I read. I read for like 20 or 30 minutes, and then I go start to get myself ready, and then I get my son up and get him ready, and then it's like the morning rush. After I get him to school, I have to come home and take care of our animals and the morning chores and finish getting ready and things like that. And so I have a dog with diabetes, so I have to give her insulin on a schedule. It's like a whole thing. And so I'm not often at my desk until like maybe 9 or close to it. And so even though I get an early start, I don't actually get to my desk for like a while. And then I like to spend really, if I'm smart, and this is most of the time, occasionally I feel like I'm too busy for my normal routine, and it's always a mistake. I don't know why I always do that. But typically I will sit for 30 minutes. I spend 15 of it reading again, because by then I've lived a whole day. By the time I get to my desk, it's been hours and I'm frantic again and I'm stressed out. So I sit down and I read for 15 minutes. And then, and usually that's the business development book that I'm reading at the time. So like Atomic Habits or whatever. And then I'll spend about 15 minutes planning my day, making sure that I know like what time all my appointments are, what things I really need to get accomplished and all that jazz. And then I try to jump in right from then to writing. I don't like to. I prefer to, like, naturally the way my brain works is my brain starts going, I'm like task. So I want to jump into more of my secondary tasks, like my emails and, all the kind of little things that I need to take care of. But the best thing for me to do at that time is start writing. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why I have to stop and read again and calm my brain down, because to keep me from going into that sort of frantic taskmaster mode. So at that time I do like a good writing chunk, an hour and a half or 2 hours before I shift into more of the smaller sort of tasky things that I have to do. And that's kind of the flow of my day. This is the same thing after I take like a break to do lunch and take care of some personal stuff. I get back on, I do another writing chunk. Then I sort of wind down with more smaller things, my emails, my communication. That's when I talk to my network. Like I still have, still in my Slack group from the Copywriter Accelerator. We still keep in touch. So that's when I sort of check in with everyone and make sure that I have everything done for the day that I need to do. And then I have a checkout routine. I have an alarm that goes off to remind me that my son's going to get off the bus in 15 minutes or so. And that's when I make sure my inbox is cleared out. I keep a big notepad on my desk to take notes through the day, but I don't like to leave them there. So I try to get them into some place where I need them to be, like in my Trello board and whatever else I need to do to sort of shut down for the day. And then that's it. And then I get off and I don't come back, because I found the worst thing that I can do for myself in the world is work late. So I don't do it.
Nice. And it sounds like most of your workday is comprised of actually writing client deliverables. About what percentage is writing client deliverables versus pitching new clients versus, kickoff calls or strategy calls with your client?
So it changes. I feel like this is seasonal for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
I firstly, I will say that Monday mornings are completely mine for business development. That is the time that I take no meetings. And I really try to check in with my, quarterly goals and figure out, just kind of let myself brainstorm and come up with big ideas and really prioritize like my content and things like that. Fridays are also completely off limits. It's my business development time. Also, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit less ideas and more, I reflect on the week that I've just had.
Mm-hmm.
I try to write down things that are important, that were great lessons that I think are worth sharing, that might be good for my emails. It's usually when I write my emails, and any like big pieces of content that I have. It's also when I send pitches. And there are times too that like I will do, sometimes it's kind of like midweek feels like a good time for me to jump in and start pitching, or lead generation activities, whatever that may look like at the moment. So it's not always strictly, it's not that I don't do those things throughout. It's just that I want to make sure, and I'm fairly flexible. I mean, I'm giving you the breakdown of my day like it's not, but there are times when I'm really not in a good place for writing. And so I will do what I can, and then I'm going to stop. Like if my brain is in some other mode, we're just going to go with it, and we're going to see what I can get done in this other way today. Other times I'm in the zone in writing, and I just won't take care of any small tasks that day. It's really not my favorite, because I end the day feeling like I didn't get enough done.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it just be like that. So I will roll with it when things go sort of sideways, but I work those things in. And as long as I'm generally accomplishing what I need to, if I'm generally getting in, whatever many hours that I need to sort of do, spend writing to make sure that I'm meeting my deadlines. And if I'm generally moving myself forward week to week, then I'll call it good enough.
That is the way to be. Like I'm better now, but I used to be, no matter how much I got done, I wish I would have got more, but then I became miserable, and then that made me less productive. But now I'm like, okay, I got done what I could, and I'm generally moving forward. That is a really great way to think about it.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that that's hard for many of us, especially those of us who are really perfectionists. I want to be productive all the time. And it's something that is just like a real bad, it's my biggest, like my toxic trait. But it is something that I've been actively working on for a super long time. And actually, I could plug, I'm not an affiliate or anything, but I'm a really big fan of the Monk Manual. It's the planner that I use that is taken me from being like a let me list all of my tasks kind of person and like check off all the boxes, and if I've checked off all the boxes, then like I had a good day, to thinking more about my being goals, not just my doing goals, but my being goals. And when I have to sit, and it has you like reflect at the end of the day, like when was I at my best, having to really think about that every day has really sort of helped to shift my mindset. So it's still something I work on,
Yeah.
but I actively work on it, because I think it's important. As creatives, we just can't be expecting ourselves to produce all the time, to like get everything done all the time. It just doesn't work that way. So who does it serve when we are so hard on ourselves?
Yeah, and I got ads for the Monk Manual. I used to, like, not anymore, but I used to get ads for them all the time, and we have to check them out. I had it
I'm telling
bookmarked.
you,
Yeah.
it's the best thing ever. I've been using mine for a few years, and it's been one of the best things I've ever done for myself.
Wow, back in the day, back when it was all the rage, I had a 5-minute journal. I think it was, the 5-minute journal. And that's where I got like into the world of like guided journals or whatever. But I haven't had one
Mm-hmm.
since the 5-minute journal. But I'm gonna revisit the Monk Manual since you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's nice. It helps me, I think, just kind of keep my head straight and not get really caught up in how, it's like I do have priorities for this day. There are some things that need to be accomplished for this day, but it's not my only focus. And I'm trying to think about like when did I do something well? Like, did I not lose my mind when my kid was being a huge turd? That is a win. I'm going to call it the highlight for my day. I handled a parenting moment really well. Like, it's okay that I didn't get, the laundry all done or whatever, because I had a great moment as a human person. And I think that that's really important for all of us to remember. I don't think a lot of us are not very good at that.
Yeah. And speaking of priorities, what are the top 3 to 5 things that must get done in your business?
On a daily basis?
Yes.
Client work and communication, I would put those as separate things because it can be easier to just sort of take care of the work and like forget to communicate. So I like to make sure I'm on top of my communication. And definitely, I mean, I would say my planning time is one of those really important things to me, because if I sit down and I'm, like I said before, this is something that sometimes I do. I'm like, I'm too busy today to sit and have my precious planning time. Like, I just need to get to work. It's a mistake every time because I have not like properly grounded and prepared myself, and I feel like I'm flailing and I'm just out here trying to like do all of this stuff, and it's just not possible. So it's really important for me to just sit down and make sure that I know in a day what I need to get done and when I'm going to do it. I don't time block like my weeks, but I like to time block my day as it comes. And I'll be like, okay, I have, an hour and a half before the next meeting. I'm going to spend that time doing this. And I also have had to learn how to manage my energy. So if I have a meeting, I'm not going to hop off that meeting and get back to writing. That's not going to happen. Whether it's a discovery meeting, whether it's a kickoff call, whether it's, checking in on edits or something like that. Usually I get a lot of energy from speaking with people, but like my brain is kind of going crazy. And I just cannot okay, now it's focus time again. I can't do that. So understanding how my day is going to look and what I can reasonably expect from hour to hour is really important. It is important. I spend an hour to an hour and a half a day on my big business goals, whatever that is. Now, occasionally this does not happen if I'm really busy and I have a deadline or whatever. That doesn't always make it, but I try to rather than spend a huge chunk of time on, whatever the project is. So if in a quarter I have as an area of focus, something that would include putting together a webinar. I want to spend some time every day doing something to move that forward. So it has to be something for me and my business, not just my client work, but my business. And I've been trying to be more, I really like to hang out on my email, but I've been trying to be more active on Instagram. So now I'm like, okay, what can I add to my stories today? Or if, something occurs to me or the mood strikes me, I'll like get on my stories and I'll talk about it. So I don't post to my feed a lot, but I've been trying to sort of become more active in my stories. That's something else that I've been doing.
Yeah. And thank you so much for mentioning that after a meeting, sometimes you have to kind of alter your expectations for how much writing you can get. And you can't dive into writing. Like, I really needed to hear that. I've been struggling with this, but I haven't accepted it yet. Like, you notice that you accepted it, you plan for it. I keep feeling defective because after a meeting, like, I cannot write. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, why do I need so much decompressed time after a meeting? I didn't know other people had this issue too. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe other people needed to hear that since I needed to hear that.
It took me a while to figure out. I mean, I think it just takes you, it's always a work in progress, learning how to manage your energy and like how you're going to work at your best from day to day. And this is another reason why I try on the top of my every day. So I use my month manual, but I also plan my week in Trello. So every day has sort of a list. And the top 3 things that I ask myself every day when I'm figuring out what I'm doing is, number 1, is this a high capacity day or a low capacity day? Because some days for various reasons are just not. And that is the perfect example is, do I have meetings today? Am I going to get really jazzed after a meeting and I'm not going to be like, that's great. I'm going to say this is low capacity because I'm doing something important, but I'm not going to be able to have a lot of output. What can I just offload completely? I call this my Chanel rule. I don't even know if this is true, but do you ever hear the thing where Chanel would say like, when you're leaving the house, to accessorize yourself perfectly when you're leaving the house, take something off. So
I
I
have
do the
heard
same
that.
thing. Whenever I plan my day, I literally make a list and then I look at it and I go, what can I lose? Realistically, what could wait until tomorrow? And I scratch it off and I move it to the next day, because I always overplan.
Mhm.
I think I've got time and I don't ever. And so rather than set myself up for failure, I just look and I think, what can wait until tomorrow? And then I will move it off. And then also just asking where I might be able to ask for help, because that's something that I don't always think to do. But like if I'm struggling with a decision, maybe I don't want to send out a proposal because I don't know what to think about pricing. That's something I can ask for help. I have a network I can go to and ask for support.
Mhm.
Maybe it's like some dumb tech thing that's been holding me back because I'm not great at tech and my husband can help me. So it's just kind of like I have to remind myself to think about it and ask for help where it makes sense. So I do those 3 things every day to try to help me keep going.
That is
And I
so
find it to be really
juicy.
cool.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to start doing that. And especially like I have like there's something called spoon theory, where if you have like variable
I know
energy
it.
by the day. Yeah, I'm a spoonie.
Yeah.
You're a spoonie. So like I don't always have a lot of spoons, but I don't like I need to put that into my planning for the day. Is this a high capacity day or low capacity day? And I over plan, so I like the what can I lose? That is great. And then where can I ask for help? I'm pretty good about that because I like leveraging experts and coaches and accountability partners. But to look at it every day, that's actually a good idea. So I'm actually going to steal this and put it in my pocket. And I'm going to use that strategy.
Good.
Yeah, for sure. Now, let me ask you this. So each day is different for everybody and creativity ebbs and flows. So what do you do when you have a deadline, but you don't feel like writing or you don't have the creativity? What do you do to get grounded and inspired?
I use Brain FM. I really like to work in silence, but after hearing about Brain FM through the TCC podcast, that was like, I should try that because it's not always quiet in my house. I have dogs that bark. My mom lives with me also, and she works from home. And if my kid is here because it's summertime and there's just noise going on, right? So I like to work in silence, but I don't often get it, and I'm easily distracted. So Brain FM helps me a lot. And also because there's a timer built in. So if I write in hour and a half chunks, I'm like, this is great. I have a 90-minute focus session right here built into the sound. And
and real quick before you go on,
that-
I want to explain to people what Brain FM is. I use it for a year, but it is like ambient music that's wired to put you into flow state, and they have like a mode for deep work, a mode for learning, and a mode for relaxation. And you can have like classical music, you can have electronica, you can have nature sounds, but it's all wired to get you into flow state. So that's what Brain FM is. All right, good day.
yeah. And I can't do it with like the classical. If it's music-y, it doesn't work for me. It distracts me too much. But when you get that sort of ethereal, just sort of pulsing, that sort of, that does help me. So that's something that helps me significantly, is just like deciding that I'm going to sit here for 90 minutes and do my best. And sometimes it looks like you're barely producing, and maybe it's like all I can do is make a terrible outline and I can't do more than that. That is what it is. And I just have to come back to it tomorrow. I try not to be up to the, just down to the wire on my timing. I try to build in lots of time into my projects because I don't know what I'm going to be able to manage from day to day. And so as a person with chronic health conditions, you just kind of don't know what's going to come up. So I like to make sure that I have time built into my schedule and start working on something earlier rather than later, so that I'm not like at the last minute trying to crank something out. It does happen where I come close to deadlines, and it's kind of like having the rituals, having the routines, having a way to signal to my brain it's focus time now. I've got my headphones in, I'm doing my Brain FM. It helps me. Again, sometimes all I can produce is garbage. That's okay, because you're going to come back to it tomorrow. Your brain is going to keep working on it. As we all know, our brains continue to work on things after we have walked away from our desk and we're going about our business. And when I come back tomorrow, I can usually do much more. I also use AI. I have used AI for a couple of years in my business. So if I'm really stuck, I'll just start plugging in like what I've got and see what it if it can generate ideas for me that really sort of spark something and set me off more creatively. Now, if I'm going through a period of time where this is becoming a recurring issue and I'm just sort of dry creatively, that tells me that I need to spend more time managing my energy input. So making sure that like some of it is kind of the content sponging, like you were talking about before, right? It's important to me that my brain is feeling creative. So whatever that means, I love poetry, I love art, I love a lot of, so I will just kind of immerse myself in the things that feel inspiring and beautiful to me. I sometimes a writing exercise that's completely different from what we're doing, I find to be helpful. So I'll write a poem about an object on my desk or, something like that, just to kind of get my brain thinking differently. And then also just kind of being gentle with yourself. I think that when we start to get really stressed out about deadlines, my brain doesn't want to work and why did anyone ever hire me for this job? I think that at least once in every project, I'm like, someone paid me to write for them. And there's always that part in the process. And then you come out of it and you're like, well, I did a good job. Like, that's great. That ended up being just fine. So like when you've gone through that a few times, I think you have to just remember to like be gentle with yourself. We are not robots. We're not machines. We are not AI. We're human people with human brains and human bodies. And sometimes they just don't cooperate with us on any given day with what we feel like we need them to do. And it's fine. It will still be fine. It will.
Yeah, it's so funny you use the analogy, we are not robots. My aunt always lovingly teases me as I have these goals and like this output I want to do. And she keeps saying, I want to be a robot. She's like, your dream is to be a robot. But like the expectations I have of myself would be ones only a robot can make. So I just have to remind myself, I am a human. I am not AI. And I know where I picked it up. Like AI wasn't popular back then, but I idolized Tim Ferriss. And to me, well, actually, I found out later. So I idolized Tim Ferriss, and to me, he did output like a robot, and he was amazing and productive. But like later, he like softened his image, and he sat down and talked to Marie Forleo. And I found out when he wrote books, he would like procrastinate and clean his shoes and like play with his plants or whatever. He was just doing the same thing other writers. So he is really productive, like more than the average human, but he had struggles as a creative too. But I didn't know till after following him for 10 years when he like softened his image. So.
Every writer I've ever heard of has their procrastination things that they do. It's like everybody. And sometimes it's like I wrote a sentence and like, that's great, I need a snack now. Or that's great, I'm going to go like switch my laundry. Like I have to keep kind of, I sit here usually and I do best when I have a good focus session, but sometimes it's not that way. And I just sort of plod my way through it. And I think that's all of us. So, we just have to always keep that in mind. It's like the best writers in the world have sort of the same issues. We're all in the same boat.
Yeah, and one thing I want to highlight, because it's something I have mastered finally. Well, I always mastered loosely. I don't want to jinx myself, but it was a hard lesson learned, and I'm glad I learned it. Start as early as you can. Don't leave yourself up to the wire. Like back in college English classes, especially, I would be working overnight. Even in law school, I had these big papers, and I would work like till dawn, and like that is like physically sickening. Then when I became an adult as a copywriter, I wouldn't work till dawn, but there were times I worked till 2 a.m. to meet deadlines early in my copy career. But then I learned, like, for the sake of my health, my sanity, and it's just a more enjoyable experience. Start early. The days where it's flowing, just keep going and give yourself buffer times on the deadline. So, like, if you have a day where nothing gets done, it's fine. You still have several more days to do it. So I think that is, like, so important.
It really is. And then it's like, it's a win-win, because if you finish ahead of your deadline because you gave yourself buffer time and you were on fire and you got it done, then you get to deliver early.
Yeah.
And how good does that make you look? It's so much better to ask for more time up front than maybe, I don't really know what's normal, but like if somebody says they can turn it around quickly and you want more time, it's better all around, because you make sure you're not going to be late. But if you're early, all the better. It's a fun surprise.
Exactly. And back when I was a freelancer, I'm in-house now, but back when I was a freelancer, I would, like, let's say I needed a week to do something, I would ask for like 10 days. Like, I would tack on buffer time, like, yeah, on the front end, like overestimate how
Right.
long it would take. So yeah, I always do that. And then within reason, when I can do it in my in-house position, I try to do that as well when setting deadlines. Like, expect it to take longer than you think it will take.
It's true. And that's something that also just really takes a lot of time to work out. When someone asks me how long it takes me to do a project, I still don't really have a great answer for that because there are so many variables.
Yeah.
But the truth is that when you are doing a lot of brand messaging, there's a lot of think time there. It's not just, like writing words and figuring out how to make an impact with conversion. I mean, usually I'm branding for the sake of something that's coming up, like, a brand, at least some brand messaging is included with my web packages, for example, but you have to have the thinking time. And so it is a little bit hard to estimate, but that's why I would always rather give myself more time than I need than err on the side of, oops, now I have to rush. And what if my brain doesn't cooperate? Or what if, I get sick or this or that happens? I have a child in school. He's home 1,000 times a year because he's sick with something, and that throws a wrench in my plans. So, it's definitely something that we all kind of have to learn how to do, but I think it's really important. It's so much better to ask for more time up front.
I agree.
And to apologize for being late.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of this interview with Michelle Simmons. Please leave a positive review and follow the show. And be sure to come back next month for part 2 of Michelle's fabulous interview.